fiscally conservative. Because if you have high growth targets and you miss your revenue targets, then your fiscal deficit increases and you will be borrowing too much. So I think it's better for us to reduce those growth targets to a more realistic level, considering all the external factors. And for
the strength of the dollar, that's probably the main driver. So what's the BSP's assessment of the currency and what's the outlook going forward?
Thank you, Eugene, for asking that question. Actually, the BSP is closely monitoring developments given the recent appreciation of the peso. Well, together with other, as you said earlier, together with other currencies in the region, following the delay in the easing of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. But at this point, the BSP, I would like to reiterate the FX policy of the BSP. We do not target any specific exchange rate level. We just let the market determine it. And what we look at when we enter into the market is that we look whether there is presence of market stress. Because if we let the market stress to be left unattended, it would affect inflation expectation. So we look at market stress, we consider fundamentals, and we also look at what's happening around the area. Are we the only ones depreciating or not? Given the fact that all of us are being affected by the current position of the Federal Reserve, I think this is only temporary, and eventually, once things clear up, it will be the.
There was an episode last year as well that there was some underspending and affected growth. I think in the second quarter of last year. So, can you give us an update? Is there a risk of underspending coming back again this year?
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. On the part of the budget execution, yes, there was some kind of a decline last year in terms of spending, but the agencies were able to provide catch-up plan by third and fourth quarter. Now, for this year in 2024, what's important to note is that the 2024 budget was already prepared by our cabinet secretaries. So all of their priority projects and programs were included in this year's budget. So with that, they were able to actually implement those projects on time. Secondly, we included the provision of early procurement, which is also included in our new government procurement reform act. We already institutionalized this because before it was only a circular from the Department of Budget and Management, but now it's already included in our new government procurement reform act. Now agencies can already bid out their projects by the time we issue the National Expenditure Program to Congress. So efficiency in terms of government spending and implementation of their projects.
So no risk of underspending coming back this year?
No. In fact, in January of this year, we already released more than 80% of the budget. So we expect by now that all board is out and ready for implementation.
Right, thank you. Yeah, so that would be a nice segue. My next question to Secretary Bagsatan. On the growth outlook, we saw the Q1 GDP numbers. There was a little bit of a softening on the investment spending side, some easing on construction activity. So do you see that as a sign that maybe the infrastructure implementation has been slowing a little bit? And do you think that's going to turn around for the rest of the year to drive growth higher?
By the space with your proposed budget. Congress, we live in a democracy, Congress can always amend the proposals of the executive, and I think we're better off because of that. Check and balance like this.
It's achievable by the end of the market administration. How big is the economy going to be? Where is unemployment going to be?
Yeah. But the most important number I mentioned earlier is that poverty incidence will go down to 9%. We want to easily by 2020, like I said, by 2030, we will be the third biggest consumer market in the world. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We still have a bit of time, so I'm going to focus on inflation, which seems to be the overarching topic for all those things that have been mentioned. And maybe I'll start with Secretary Arce on the inflation outlook. Can you give us a bit of a report card in terms of the supply side measures, non-monetary measures that have been done, and how effective have they been to bring down inflation pressure?
Thank you. Yeah, as mentioned earlier, from IMF, big part of the inflation, particularly food inflation, that experienced in the past quarters was coming from the supply side. And that's one, primarily due to uptick in oil prices, particularly for staple like rice. Second, but that was also reduced by protectionist measures from the El Nino and the exporting countries trying to reduce exports and effort to protect the domestic consumers. But on the other hand, there were also domestic challenges, supply bottlenecks, and also policy and regulatory issues. And the government, particularly our president, addressed that issue early on, late last year. He created the Interagency Committee on Inflation and Market Outlook. It tasked then other agencies to monitor the market, the prices, supply, the imports for basic commodities. And we report to the President periodically. We have almost monthly sessions on the policy issues and responses and the solutions to these problems. And one of the outputs of those last month of this administrative order number 20, which address the administrative issues, particularly the administrative procedures and policies governing the timely and efficient importation, of agricultural commodities, particularly our staple. Because what we noticed was that while we are short of production, short of what's needed for consumption at affordable prices, the importation was often inadequate and coming in late or too early. In other words, it destabilizes the market. The importation process destabilizes the market more than what we achieved. So the effort was to simplify the procedures in issuing sanitary and phytosanitary measures, for example, that are required for the importation of agricultural commodities. Okay, so that's one. On the other hand, we are also addressing the longer-term issues and local activity in agricultural suffering mentioned earlier. And if you look at the budget for the Department of Agriculture, for example, during the Marcos administration in the last 2 years, 69% increase in the budget. There's no other sector that has received that much increase. And so the next issue for us is to ensure that budget will lead to increase in productivity. We are seeing that they are going to the right spending, for example, better and more efficient irrigation systems, addressing the lack of logistics for agricultural products, and so on and so forth. Then this is be able to reduce the cost of food and also reduce our dependence on imports.
What moves are we expecting to improve, particularly lowering of the power and of course the food, particularly curbing the rise inflation.
Prices to go down by 20%, maybe by September. This would entail one, increasing production, and second, reducing tariffs. So I think we have a game plan in place as far as that is concerned. With regard to power, there have been some decisions of the Supreme Court with regard to electricity prices. What we tend to do is the producers to be able to get those revenues. Just to let them in, so keeping an eye on inflation. But the bigger problem would be on rice. And that is something that we think we can have a grip on and handle. And we expect us to go down between July to September.
Secretary RC, I believe that she addressed the question to Secretary RC. But now, would you like to repeat your question just for the benefit of Secretary Balisacan?
Earlier, I mentioned lowering of costs, particularly two. One is food and one is power. So I would like to know what government is doing in terms of the two, most especially price inflation, which is last year, April last year, 3%, and this year is 23.9%. So it seems to me that we have to have drastic measures in terms of lowering the cost of rice. Thank you.
Reducing the cost of inflation for electricity, power, and rice. Well, yeah, the price of rice, the domestic prices of rice have been a challenge for the past couple of months. As we have seen, inflation there was major contributor to the overall inflation. But it's possibly because the world price of rice had been early last year. And especially early last year, the second half of last year. And today it's still rising, and the domestic prices are simply following that world prices. As you know, the world rice, the Philippine rice market has been opened by the rice classification law. The power sector is fully private. Unlike in our neighbors, a big part of that sector is state-run. So it's basically reflecting the market fundamentals there, particularly the price of fuel being bought. On the other hand, our approach is that we don't want to return to the old price stabilization law, which became a major problem fiscally and economically. And so the pressure for the government to come back and put bring back the oil price stabilization law, and then for us particularly economic condition, we don't want to do problem of economic stability in the past. On the other hand, we want to protect the vulnerable groups, the consumers, the consumers, the highly public, by providing assistance of subsidies when world prices are roughly increasing. That's, to us, is the most fiscally feasible way of addressing the problem.
Thank you, sir. And the panel has the honor of being asked a question by the great Ramon Ang.
Good afternoon. I'd like to share with our audience here today why is it that fuel prices and power prices in the Philippines is higher compared to our neighboring countries. As you know, San Miguel and Petron is in Malaysia. In Malaysia, the prices of gasoline is 20 pesos per liter. In the Philippines, it's 60. Reason, Malaysia subsidized 1/3 The other 1/3 is taxes. Philippine government impose taxes. And our neighboring countries don't impose taxes. But if you look at it on an equal basis, our prices without the subsidy and without taxes is even lower than Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand. It's also the same as power. Our power generation compared to our neighboring countries are lower, but we impose taxes on the power sector, on fuel, and we also don't subsidy. We don't give subsidy on power. That's why our power prices are higher. But if you are foreign investors that want to come to the Philippines, that is not a reason for not coming. You should come and put up your own power generating plant in your factory, which is very easy to put up. And Philippine government encourage all big energy consumers to put up. For example, if you want to put up your own legal processing plant, you put up your own power plant. It's welcomed by Yusek Barsigan. I think our country is market force compared to our neighboring countries. Our neighboring countries are still subsidizing heavily on fuel and power. Why are they able to do it? Because Malaysia has its own oil production. Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam. Our oil production is only 6,000 barrels per day compared to our neighboring countries, average 1 million barrels a day. That's why they can put in subsidy. Philippines, we don't have oil, but we have a very big reserve in West Philippine Sea. That's why they are very interested on the Philippines. So let go of it. We should protect our territory. Salamat po.
Salamat po. So, there was no question. That's all you On that note, I think it's time for us to conclude this panel. We would like to say thank you to Finance Secretary Ralph Recto. Let's all give him a warm round of applause. Budget Secretary Amena Pangandaman, Secretary Arsenio Balisacan of NEDA, DSE's Illuminada Sigat, IMF's Rudmar Gunmanson, and our most esteemed moderator, Mr. Paracueles. I would like to invite the panel to please go to the front of the stage for a very quick photo op before we proceed to the second panel. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all give them a warm round of applause.